This conference will now be recorded.
In last meeting, we just started about methods topic, right? I just have explained about methods concept, how to implement the code in the override methods. What is the override method, and how we have how we have to write the code uh, in a particular override method. The syntax related issues, okay, return types, access modifiers, all these things I have explained. And also we just have override the method called init, right? This init method works when the form is initializing. In this method, we have seen about super functionality. Like suppose if you are writing the code above the super, so when it will works. If you are writing the code below the super, when it will works. So all these things I have explained in the last meeting. Okay. Okay, so all these things we just seen about this super functionality. So coming to the next, for example, let me tell you something. Um, this is a init method functionality. Init method works for when the form is initializing. It is completely related to form outline. It is not inside the functionality. Okay, suppose if you go to the data source methods in form level, we don't use much methods. Only few methods, one or two methods we will use related to form. But functionality wise, mostly we will work with the data source methods. Data source methods are very important. 95% of the methods we will override in the data source level. Only 1% here, and remaining 4% in the data source field level. Remaining 1% in the design level we will use. So coming to the methods here. Here also you can find the override methods in data source level. Suppose if you see here also there is a init method. Here also there is a init method. Here also there is a init method. In form level there is a init method. In data source level also there is a init method. Let me open this init method also. Click on here. See here. The same syntax. This is form init method. Form init. Okay, form init method. This one is form init. This is data source init. So what will be the difference between form init and data source init? Form init method works when the form is initializing. Data source init when the data source is initializing. Data source in the sense when the data is connecting to the form. At that moment, if you want to implement before data initialization, after data initialization, okay, then you can go for data source init method. Okay, here also we will see the same piece of code I'm writing here. This is okay, I will write like this. Form init before super. Okay, form init after super. This is data source init before super. This is data source init after super. So when it comes to the sequence, which method, I mean, which info log will print first? Coming to the priority wise, this will print first, because when the form before going to initializing the whole form, this particular sentence will, this code will call. whatever the code we are writing above the super of form init, this will work. I mean, whatever the code we are writing here, that piece of code will work. After that, when the form initialized, okay, so automatically system start initializing the data source. uh, so that's what. Second, whatever the code we are writing here, this will execute. After initializing the data source, it needs to complete, so that this line, I mean, whatever the code we are writing here, this will execute. Finally, when the form is loaded completely, this fourth sentence, I mean, whatever the code we are writing here, that piece of code will execute. When the form is initializing, so these are the sequences will, in this way, the code will execute. First, whatever the code we are writing here, that piece of code will execute. Next, this one. Next, this one. Next, here, this one. Okay, let's see. We have two init methods are there. One is form init method. Second one is data source init method. Form init method. Form before super, after super, in between data source init method will execute. I mean, 1 and 4 in between, 2 and 3 will execute. Whatever the code we are writing at 2 and 3, that will execute in between 1 and 4.
So even if I have multiple data source against a form, like I can, so all those data source related comments will first execute, and then later the last comment of the form will execute, right? Even if I have
Yes,
multiple
yes.
data sources.
Yes, of course,
Okay.
of course. In that particular order only. Suppose if you have multiple data sources, so in that data source also, which data source is first, which data source is next. So in that way, order will execute. But anyway, in between 1 and 4, whatever the codes we have written in multiple data sources, that code will execute. See, first it is executing. After that, you can see after 1 second, 2, 3, 4. In between 1 and 4, this is 1. In between 1 and 4, 2, 3 is executing. So it depends on the loading of the data source. But anyway, so form init method mostly we will use for form related. For example, when the form is initializing, before that I need to do something, but it is not related to any data kind of thing. Here we won't execute any code which is related to data, but here it is completely related to data. In data source init method, we will write this method, we will use this method for only for data related operations. Guys, just a second, hold on the line. Okay, so before initializing these two things, so whatever the code we are writing here in the init method, that piece of code will execute definitely. But here in data source init method, it is which is, I mean, which is related to completely data. We will work on data itself. But here it is a form user interface related functionalities. If we have anything for that purpose, we will use this init method. It is purely related to outline of the form, before and after, but we won't use much this init method really. But a data source init method has highest priority because it is purely related to data. Okay, anyway, I will tell you one scenario, real-time scenario, which is related to data source init method. Definitely you will understand that. Okay, after I mean, after 1 or 2 classes, I will write one real-time scenario in this init method, and I will show you. So when it is working and how it is working, then you will definitely come to know that the init method real functionality. But just understand meanwhile when the method is executing, and so what kind of things are doing, what kind of things are doing when we are overriding these methods. Just understand that meanwhile. Okay, coming to the in data source, the next method which I'm going to tell you about, uh, init value. I'm going to tell you about init value. This method works when we are creating a record. For example, here, okay, where is the form? For example, let me execute the form once and I'll tell you. When we are trying to creating a record, at that moment, suppose if I want to pass any default values to the record, at that moment we can use init value method. Okay, let me open the form and I will show you one scenario here for init value method. See here, I just want to create a record here in this particular grid. I'm clicking on new button. The record is creating. At this moment, I'm planning to populate the today date in the date of birth column. For example, it is a transaction record or creation record. Okay, registration date, for example. Just assume that. Okay, don't think about it. It is a date of birth. Okay, it is a registration date. So when we are registering, we need to populate today date itself, right? Automatically. So when I'm creating a new record, by default here I need to populate today date. For this purpose, I will use init value method. Initial values. Initial values. When we are creating a record, so system automatically populate the today date. If you written a code in init value method, okay, let's do one thing. Let's override the init method or init value method, and here I'm writing a piece of code emp table, just a second, emp table dot dob equal to, I'm just assigning today function which will return today date. Okay, and just a second, let me make it normal tabs. Okay, let me execute this form. Let me execute this form. Okay, now I'm creating a record here. See, in date of birth, automatically today date is populating as per the system date. Any initial values, for example, before every time I will prefer the employee as a contract employee or a temporary employee. So I can also populate when I'm creating a record by default, and I can disable the value even here. Okay, so we need to make something like just open the init method, and in this again emp table dot emp type equal to emp type, and for example every time I will create an employee, I'm hiring an employee, every time the default employee type should be contract, so that I can take like this. So when I'm creating a record, automatically date of birth will be populated, today date will be populated, and the contract type emp type, in the emp type field contract will place automatically. Got it? These are the default initial values, default values. If you want to make some automations while we are creating a record, so we can use this init value method. Okay, so let me comment on this statement. Or else we'll delete this one, no problem. Okay, and now the next method which I'm going to tell you about, there is a method called validate write. This is very important method. Validate write. This method will execute when we are trying to save the record. When we are trying to save the record, that means suppose you have created a record and you already entered some values here, and when we are trying to save the record, then the system will execute init, then the system will execute validate write method, so that in that method we can write some validations. For example, I'm entering age like minus 1000. Is it correct? Is it correct value? But even though now system will accept your value, system will accept this value definitely. Okay, to write a validation on particular age, we can use validate write method. That method will execute when I'm trying to save the record. If the value is incorrect, so system will give a warning message or error message, depends upon your requirement. Okay, let's do one thing. Let's write validation on age. Only the record needs to save if the value in between 20 and 60. Otherwise, when I'm trying to save the record should not save. That is my requirement, so that I can use validate write method. If you observe something, the validate write method syntax is a little bit different from init method, init value method, but the return type is boolean. See here, the return type is boolean. This return type is wide. Init method return type is wide, so that we no need to return anything especially. But here the return type is boolean, so that we need to return true or false. It is a boolean, right? So we need to write return true, or we need to write return false finally after your business logic. Suppose after writing your validation, if you are writing return true, that means save the record. If you are writing return false, don't save the record. Okay, here it is a default syntax. Don't delete this one, just keep it like this. Okay, boolean ret, it is a variable. Ret is a variable. In this place you can write anything. Okay, but they have written some variable name ret equal to super, return ret. So by default this method will return true. Understand? Here I have not mentioned anything. By default the system takes true value. In now in ret we will have true. By default record will save, right? Here you will enter some data. After creating the record you will enter some data, and when you click on save button, why it is saving the record? Because we are returning true here. Now I will write false when if there is any incorrect value the end user is entering, then I will write return false to don't save the record. After super I will write my business logic. If emp table dot is less than 20, okay, or emp table dot is greater than 60, so that I'm writing one warning message, okay, is error. Now I need to write return false because system is returning true by default, so that's what I'm writing, especially return false, especially return false, so that when the uh, when the business logic, I mean when the value fall into this particular below 20 or above 60, okay, system automatically validate your condition, and the warning message will show, and record will not save. This line is must 100%. Return false. System anyway shows this message, but we need to stop from saving the record, right? Then we need to write this one. If you are not writing this statement, by default your record will save even though you are showing the message. System will show this message, but your record will save. So that's what I'm writing return false especially here. Okay, let's execute. I will try to give below 20 value, above 60 value, and we'll see whether the warning message is showing or not. Okay, let's create a new record. Okay, I'm entering the value like 15, and I'm trying to save the record. See here. Okay, and try to close this message and try to close the form. Try to close the form. Again, showing the message. The navigation request was cancelled due to unfinished work on this form. Unfinished work means you just left the value of 15 in this record and you are trying to close the form. When the form is getting close, system will call again validate write method. For example, I'll tell you in-depth scenario here. For example, you have created a record and you have entered all the values, and when finally you should not, no need to hit the save button. Understood? You have entered all the values and no need to hit the save button to save the record. When you go for finishing, when you go for closing the form, system automatically calls the validate write method and your record will save automatically. This is one scenario. Second scenario, I have entered all the values in my record and I will try to create a new record. Okay, let's create a new record. See, again, validate write method is calling. When I'm clicking on the new button, again, validate write method is calling. That means, suppose you have entered all the values in the record, no need to hit the save button. When you are clicking on new button, automatically system calls your validate write method and record will save automatically. And one more thing, third scenario, you have entered all the values, and when you select a record, suppose if you are trying to select any 103 record or 104 record, automatically the above record will get saved automatically. So finally, you should understand here the concept is no need to click on the save button. First scenario, enter all the values and try to close the form. If the form closed successfully, your record will be there in the database itself, because system calls the validate write method when the form is getting closed. First scenario. Second scenario, you have entered all the values and again you are trying to creating a new record. So this record automatically save and the system will allow to create a new record. This is second scenario. Third scenario, you have entered all the values here, and when you are trying to select any other record by default, so system automatically save your previous record. That's what in these three cases we are getting warning message. Any doubt here? Okay, right. So this is about validate write method. So okay, let me give like 65 value and try to create a new record. See here, error message. If I am giving correct value, system will save your record. And for example, if you want to write any field validation, another field validation, you can simply write down below this business logic. Below this business logic, again, you can write here. You have written for age, you will write for another field directly. So all the field validations we can write in validate write method one by one. Okay, another field validation you just write down here. Just give some space and start writing your piece of code for next field. Okay.
Arjun, so yeah, so after the record is inserted, we are applying after super, right? So before super, in which type of situation will be using before super in validate, right? You get my question?
Before saving the record, so what kind of scenario will be there means basically in this validate write method 99.9% we will not write above the super, because when the system calls the super functionality, we need to validate the values which is there in the record. Right now you have created a record, just observe the scenario whether really we need to write above super, and what kind of situation we will write above the super. Just understand here.
Okay.
I have created a record. Now I have entered 105, some name, some age. I have entered like this. Now these 3 values or 4 values or 5 values, where the values has saved in database. These 4 values, these record values are saved in database right now.
Not
No,
yet. No.
it is in buffer.
Yeah.
It is in buffer right now. So we are validating the buffer. That is the reason I'm writing below the super. When the super calls, system calls the validation code. At that moment, whatever the values we have entered in the buffer, then system will consider those values. System directly calls the buffer functionality and it will pick the values. And at that moment, they have a chance to validate the values which is there in the record. Okay, which is there in the record. But if you're writing about the super, we should not get the values directly. We should not get the values. So that is the reason always this kind of validations we need to write after the super only.
Yeah, validations we cannot do before the any value is entered. We cannot write validation.
No, because when the super calls, then only whatever the values there in the buffer, system pick the values. System can pick the values. Before super, nothing will be there. Empty record, right? Empty record. So that is the reason there is no even 0.1 priority for above super in validate rate method especially, but in another method we have a priority. And next after a couple of minutes I will tell you one more method. In that method you will understand the above super functionality. I will tell you very clearly in that method. But here I don't think above super functionality will works efficiently, or this kind of scenario I don't find really. Okay, now okay, fine. So in this validate rate method, you can write for a couple of fields, not only for age. You can write for a date of birth. For example, I just want to write a date of birth scenario. If emp table dot dob, if it is greater than today, that means suppose date of birth I'm giving future date. For example, it is a February 20th I'm giving. Is it correct? Date of birth should not be greater than today date, right? Either today or below today, less than today. Value. Date of birth should not be tomorrow date or future date, but system accepting this value right now. So that is the reason to restrict this one. I'm writing like this: emp table.dob. If it is greater than today, so I'm giving something like a error message, dob error. Okay, dob error, and I'm writing return false. Like this, you can write different field validations in this validate right method. Let me comment this one. Now there is another method like validate, right? We have a method called validate delete. Validate delete, the same syntax like validate write. Validate write method and validate delete method syntax is same. Here also the return type is boolean, so we need to write return true, we need to write return false. Okay, when this method will execute, first this is the scenario. Validate write method will execute when we are trying to save the record, right? We have entered all the values in the record, empty record, and when we hit the save button, then system will call this method. If all the values are correct, then system will save your record in database permanently. That is the process will happen in the validate write method. If any wrong value is there, obviously system will restrict from saving the record. But this method simply opposite for the validate write. When we are trying to deleting the record, suppose I'm trying to deleting this record. So my business logic, if status is yes, for example 102 record status is yes, I mean this employee is active employee. When I'm trying to deleting this record, when I click on delete button, okay, this message will show. When I click on yes, now system will call validate delete method. When you click on yes button here, system automatically calls the validate delete method. Then I will write the business logic. If status is yes, don't delete my record. If status is 0, if status is inactive, delete my record. That kind of business logic I will write in validate delete method. Okay, simply I will write the code here for that scenario. If emp table dot status equal to 1, 1 means active. Okay, like I'm writing warning message, active cannot be deleted. Okay, and must and should we need to write return false. That's it. No need to write else condition. Else condition is 0. By default, this method will return true. True means record delete. Only I will write whatever whatever the scenario I don't want to execute, that only I will write. Whatever the scenario, by default it will execute, I don't want to touch that. That's what I'm not writing else condition. Why? If you write else condition also, no need, no need to write really, because if you are writing else condition, if you are not writing else condition, system will execute that only. So that is the reason only I'm writing if status is 1, system should not delete the record. That scenario only I'm writing here. If the status is 0, I mean the status field is 0, anyway system will delete automatically that record. Okay, let me execute the record. Let me execute this form and we'll see. Okay, here the second record status is yes, right? I'm trying to deleting this second record, 102 record, clicking on yes. See, okay, and fourth record, 104 record, clicking on yes, same message.
So in this case, it was just the same table, and we are deleting and we are validating on the same table, right? So like, how do we do like for example, we've seen one example using joins previously, where in an employee table, when the status is 1, then in the loan table, when they try to delete the relevant record, it will not let you delete. If you want to implement such a logic which involves multiple tables, then like, can you just give us an idea, like how do we write, like do we use joins here, or how do we handle it?
No need to take that much um, um, no need to think about in that much. Simply we have a
Okay.
delete actions concept is there. I will tell you that.
Oh, no
No
worries.
need to
Yeah.
code, no need to write any piece of code. Simply we just need to implement the delete actions concept. Okay, I'll show you that. Here there is a delete actions. In this case, I will tell you. Okay, in one class we will see this concept, delete actions. For
Okay,
example,
fine. Yeah.
okay, let me tell you in 1 or 2 minutes about this delete actions. Anyway you asked me. For example, we have a main table. This is our main table. Each and every for each and every record we have loans, right? In loan table, more than one record or more than one record. For some records we don't have a loans. For example, if I'm trying to deleting this record, if we have any transactions existed on the loan table, we should not delete this record because it is a parent record. If already transactions are there in the loan table, how can I delete this record? That is one scenario. So in that case, if you created any delete action, system will definitely restrict from deleting this record. System will restrict you so that this record will not delete. That is one case. Second case, if you want to really delete this record because this employee left from your organization, so you don't want to keep those records. So whoever left from your office organization, you need to delete all the records permanently. Then another scenario is there. Okay, if you delete this record, the relevant records from the loan table also will be deleted along with this record. So this record will delete. In loan table, for example, 2 to 3 records will be there, though those 2 to 3 records also will be deleted. That is the second scenario. These two scenarios, how to implement, I will tell you in future. Okay, no need to write any business logic, just we need to apply the properties. That's it, just properties. I will tell you that. I have remembered this concept, I'll tell you. But through code we can't do anything. Already they have given some delete actions concept, so that if you implement a delete actions concept, no need to write any business logic directly. Okay, now the next scenario I'm telling you about, there is an active method in data source. There is a active method is there. Active method return type is int. Active method return type is int. Okay, so this will return integer value. But what is integer here? Okay, I'll tell you that. This active method works, for example, currently my focus on 101 record system, I mean cursor focus is on 101 record. Now I'm transferring that focus to 104 record. At this moment, active method will call. When the focus applied on a record, system automatically calls the active method. For example, I'm selecting 102 record. At this moment, active method will call. When I'm selecting 103 record, at this moment, active method will call. So what can I do with this method? Okay, for example, I have selected 103 record. In this record, status is 0. Status, this employee status is inactive employee. Am I right? So here, if the employee is inactive, this button should be disabled. So I don't want to see the personal information for inactive employees. I don't want to enable this personal information button to inactive employees. So I don't want to see the leaves, loans, etc., etc. So finally, I just want to disable this button. If I'm selecting this record, for this record also, this button should be disabled. I'm selecting 102 record. For this button, this should be enabled because he is an active employee. For this employee, all the information I will store, I will see everything in personal information. But if the employee is inactive, not in active mode, for that person, we should not enable personal information button. When this will happen, when the record is selecting, immediately it should happen. So active method will help you. So this button has to disable and enable based on the status field when I am selecting the record. So when you are selecting the record, this functionality has to execute. So when the record is selecting, system automatically calls the active method. So we need to write inactive method. So we need to disable and we need to enable according to the status field value. So directly, which control unit enable? Personal information button, right? See this one. This button has to disable and enable. So go to this button control properties. There is a property called auto declaration. Make it yes. Make it yes, because this name, this control name, I need to use in X++ code. So that's what I'm making this control auto declaration property yes, so that I can declare this name automatically in the code. That is the meaning of auto declaration. You need to make this yes, so that this control name, what is the control name? This one. Copy this name. I'm copying this name. Okay, copy, so that this name I can use in X++ code. Now go to the active method. Open this active method. Here I'm writing piece of code. If emp table dot status equal to 1. If it is 1, what I need to do? button should be enabled, right? Copy that button name. Sorry, paste that button name. Already I have copied there. Dot. See here. When I press dot operator, we are getting the methods of that button control. How it is coming? When we made auto declaration yes. That is the reason we are accessing all the methods which is related to personal information control. So we need to make auto declaration yes in the properties of that particular design, in the control properties, so that you can access the button control methods. Here there is a enabled true. Okay. In else condition, else enabled false. Okay. Else condition false. Let's execute and see. You just need to select the record. That's it. Button should be button will disable and enable, depends on the value of the record. I have not written else emp table dot status equal to 0 because we are writing one, else condition is 0, right? So no need to mention. See here, in this first record, status is 0. That's what personal information button has disabled. Select the second record, enabled. Select the third record, disabled. Select the fourth record, enabled. Third record. See, nothing is happening when I'm clicking on it. Clear? This active method will works for this kind of requirements only. To disable the controls, to enable the controls based on some conditions, we will use active method only for this kind of requirements. We will not use for another requirements. Okay. So in next meeting we will see a few more methods in data source and data source field level,